do you do when somebody comes up to you and says, you know, I really don't believe you have dementia. You don't look like you have Alzheimer's. It happened to me the first time after I'd given a public address and I was asking questions from the audience. Somebody stood up and raised their hand and they said, you know, I've been working in Alzheimer's for 12 years now and I watched you very closely and I don't think you have Alzheimer's. I said, oh. I said, well, what leads you to that conclusion? She says, well, I know what Alzheimer's looks like. I said, oh, well, what does it look like? She said, well, it doesn't look like you. I said, okay, we've established that. Now, what does it look like? And she couldn't tell me. Now, it was probably mean-spirited of me to push her to the point to say, I really don't know. Because it was an innocent enough question, but it was also an awful question to ask someone. If you walked up to somebody in a wheelchair and said, you know, I've been watching you roll around here, and I've been looking at your legs, and I don't think you belong in a wheelchair. Would you ever doubt anybody belonged in a wheelchair? Would anyone pretend like they belong in a wheelchair? Would anyone pretend like they have Parkinson's disease? Yeah, that happens to people with Parkinson's disease. People walk up to them when they find out they have Parkinson's disease and say, well, you don't look like Michael J. Fox. You don't look like my grandfather. This is something that, in being open about this with groups of people who have dementia, especially in the early stages, almost everyone has felt that, if not heard those words, from people who love them and from people who know them. I'm not sure you have Alzheimer's. You don't seem to have Alzheimer's. You don't act like you have Alzheimer's. I asked a noted psychiatrist once from Johns Hopkins how he diagnosed Alzheimer's, and he said, I can smell it. I said, well, what does it smell like? He said, well, I can just tell. I said, well, what do you tell? He says, well, I use the nodding syndrome measure. That is, when I ask a question of someone with Alzheimer's, they nod their head and turn to their caregiver. Now, that is often the case. But is that a case of a beat-up husband or wife who just, in order to stay married, always turns to his wife who's going to answer the question anyway, and says, you go ahead and answer it? Or is it the question of someone who's living with Alzheimer's and has become too dependent, sometimes wholly dependent on their caregiver to do their thinking for them? Even when someone addresses them directly and says, how are you doing? And you turn to your caregiver and smile and wait for them to tell how you're doing. This is a condition of dementia. It's a condition of all forms of dementia. And you can read it in people's eyes. You can read when they think you have dementia because they think you're going to die. You can read it when they think you have dementia because they tear up, because they look sad, because they're looking deep into your eyes thinking there, but for the grace of God go I. Because in their heart of hearts they're thinking, I'm going to lose a good friend. I'm going to lose my husband. As that one caregiver said in the slide here, my husband's body is going to be laying next to me, breathing in bed, but that's not going to be my husband. I can't think of any more stronger example of the stigma of people with dementia, of seeing us by some standard that's unenunciable. That's not such a word, I just made it up. that people can't see that in themselves. So when people say to me, I was walking down the hall here after after my last presentation. And a man stopped me and said, you know, I noticed you only looked at your notes twice. I said, yes. He said, but you spoke for 12 minutes. And I said to him, I could have spoken for an hour and a half if they'd given it to me. I said, because when you're speaking from your heart, when you're speaking from your life's experience, when you're bearing your soul, you don't lose life's experiences. You don't lose your heart. You don't lose your soul when you have dementia. What you may lose is your ability to move your articulators. You may lose the ability to communicate in ways that other people communicate. But all of that is inside of you. You know you have dementia. Even if you are saying to the outside world, there's nothing wrong with me, it's all with you. You know there's something wrong here. So on one level, it's very offensive when people think that and say that, because they've missed the ultimate me. They've wasted time here figuring out, golly, you know, you're a black person, but you're smart. How can that be? And instead of understanding who I am, they focused on the color of my skin. Golly, you have this condition or that condition, but it's just amazing how you get along. It's not about how good I am on crutches or with a prosthetic leg or in speaking when I'm losing my voice. It's about who I am as a human being. And it may take a little while longer, or I may communicate it differently than all of you would communicate it. But my God, some of us are down to giving you a business card that says, I have Alzheimer's. And for God's sakes, don't be your pushy self. I need some time to figure out my responses. That's what happens to us. We're down to giving out business cards to forewarn a waitress who's in a hurry or a service provider that we need a little bit more time because we have dementia. Now that's a reflection, I think, on our busy society. Now hurry up. You're on Facebook, and if it takes 10 seconds for it to load, then you're on Twitter. And if that takes 20 seconds to load, you're back to Facebook. And then maybe you'll check your Gmail. Because time, lived time, has become shorter and faster to us. And for those of us with disabilities, lived time has become longer and more painful and more difficult for us to deal with, especially early on with our lived time when we're just figuring things out. And that's the very time when people want us to hurry up because they want to be assured that we're okay. And the way we assure that we're okay is to act okay. Well, how do you act okay? Well, you don't forget any words. You don't have to find words. You always stay on task. You're always caught up with a conversation. Those are signs people look for to see if you have dementia. But in the earlier stages of dementia, most of those signs are still there. We're just, and I don't know if we're smart enough or dumb enough to cover them up. We don't say, wait a minute, I've lost track of where we are here. We try to catch up on our own. We don't say, wait, I'm a little confused because we're talking about 4 or 5 different things here like we always do, and I can't follow 4 or 5 things. We just pick one thing out. And fortunately for me, because I'm tall and have a PhD, people are willing to wait to see what the doctor said. But for people who are not tall and don't have PhDs, they just look at us quizzically like, well, aren't you with the program? Why can't you catch up? So for those of you in the audience who have dementia, I don't have an easy answer to how you respond to people who think you don't have dementia or actually say you don't have dementia. It doesn't do either one of us any good for me to be offended by that because that just shows their naivety. It's not a reflection on you. I at first thought it was a positive reflection on me because I knew what I was doing in my head and nobody seemed to know it. And even now, I've reached a point with my symptoms where I reach a point where I know when I'm not going to know a word at the end of a sentence. I have trouble noun finding. And I figure that out about halfway through the sentence. And my language of thought is faster than I can speak. So I'm thinking, what the hell is it now? Where are you going with this? What's that guy's name? What are you going to say when you get to the end? How are you going to turn this around so that you can change the subject without anybody noticing you change the subject? Those are all internal conversations I have with myself in a split second. And it's because I have dementia. So should I get a medal because I'm good at covering it up? Or should I be defrocked as a fraud because I'm so insecure I don't want people to know that I have dementia? Well, the answer is probably somewhere in between. And that's the answer for everybody, I suspect, is somewhere in between. Should we wear a big badge that says I have dementia so nobody asks us? A friend of mine, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, carried around his scores for his psychological tests as a proof of the validity of what the diagnosis was. My wife changed insurance 6 times the first 6 years I had dementia. So I was diagnosed 6 times with dementia because no two neurologists trust each other's diagnoses. So they all have to make their own diagnoses. And when I tell people that, the doubters think, see, they can't even come to a consensus. It takes 6 of them to decide if he's got dementia or not. This is a very difficult world to live in, living with dementia. We're very good at pretending it's not difficult, but that doesn't mean it isn't difficult. And I think most of the people in the audience know that. It's why you fear having dementia. It's why you see us as being empty shells that the dementia has eaten up or sucked out of our bodies or drawn away. You know that's what's happening to us. But you say to us, you don't look that way. Or you say to us, well, it hasn't happened to you yet. You're still my husband. I'm always going to be your husband. I'm always going to have dementia. I'm always going to be Richard. Now I'd like to introduce a friend of mine, Sid. Sid is from the United States. And he has a different, we still got time. He has a different slant on this about what it is like when professionals don't believe you have dementia. And you know you have dementia. Sid?
I live in Connecticut, in the United States. I was diagnosed 3 years ago with Alzheimer's, probably dementia of, dementia of the Alzheimer's type. When I was diagnosed, I sat down with 10 symptoms of Alzheimer's and created strategies to deal with the disease. My wife was really devastated. She said, I don't want to lose my friends and family and everything like that. And I wasn't acting very well. So what I did was I created strategies, and I really practiced how to be my normal, which was the new normal. And that's worked out really well for me over the years. And when I talk to people and I meet people, I don't tell them I have dementia. I just talk to them just as a normal person having a normal conversation, maybe until we get around to what do you do? Because I tell people I'm retired. Well, I do a lot of advocacy work, and I talk about dementia, and I try to educate people about the early stages of dementia. I try to put their minds at ease, and I show that people can talk to me and relate to me. This has worked out really well for me. I'm a very positive person. I figure if I'm going to forget something, I'm going to forget the things that I can't do, because I can't remember them anyway. But when I go to see a doctor, this creates a lot of confusion for the doctor. As I said, I was diagnosed 3 years ago, and the doctor that diagnosed me basically diagnosed me on the interview. I saw him for 2 hours. At the end of the 2 hours, he said, "Sid, I'm sorry to say this, but you have Alzheimer's." I went to my general practitioner and told him, and he says, "Well, I don't believe that. I don't think you have dementia or Alzheimer's." So I went back to the diagnosing doctor. I looked him in the eye, and it said, "Nobody believes that I have dementia. What do you see that everybody else doesn't?" And he said, it was how you spoke, how you lived on a daily basis. And what I thought was kind of strange was body language, but I never asked him about that. I asked him, "What stage am I at?" And he said, "Well, stages aren't purely defined." He said, "Well, some of your skills are mild and some of them are moderate." And he said, "You should always go out and try to retain the skills that you have and really work on them and not worry so much about the things that you can do." And that's really been very optimal for me. I also went and took cognitive training. I was medicated. The medication worked very good. It sped my thinking and kind of pushed away some of the fog. And I was able to do a lot of compensation, but the cognitive training, which was 3 months of intensive training, really helped me with the executive function testing. I was tested like 6 months ago, and the neuropsychologist said, "You don't have dementia, you should go back to work." And I said, "Well, that's impossible." And so that was a really long discussion. I have a new doctor, and he says that I don't have dementia. People with dementia know that they have dementia. It's your abilities are like way up here. I mean, I'm an early onset. I left work at the age of 57, so at the height of my career, the height of my earning power, and the slope was just so dramatic. This just doesn't happen to a normal person. So it's a double-edged sword. If any of you met me outside or came to our booth for Dementia Alliance and talked to me for a while, you'd say, "Well, Sid doesn't have the symptoms. He can make sense. He can follow conversations." And I kind of take that as a positive, because that's where I really worked so hard. Because going back to what my wife had said, she didn't want to lose all of our friends and family and concern them. So to me, saying, "Sid, you don't have dementia," if it's a person here, that's fine. When I go to the doctor and he has to fill out my disability papers and he says, "Sid, you don't have dementia," that is a problem. And it's a problem with a lot of people that have early onset, that are younger, that have early onset dementia. Is because it's not viewed as a disease that affects people in their 40s and 50s. So, thank you very much.